ring hit me on that spot, and when we were done talking, he got off me, and he tripped on a toy because I don't like to clean up, and I live with my sister. So he slipped on a toy, and he accidentally hit me again.
Assemblyman Dr. Joaquin Arambula's 7-year-old daughter with very dramatic testimony earlier this week. She's the alleged victim in the misdemeanor child abuse case. She described a different version of how she got a bruise on her face in court. That conflicted with what she told investigators. Arambula's middle daughter also called to the stand this week, just like her sister, clinching a stuffed animal for comfort, and during her testimony also dropped a bombshell.
And why did your mom squeeze you?
Because I did something wrong.
And of course, they're saying that the mom squeezed her hard and hit her instead of saying that her dad did originally. Of course, a lot of conflicting testimony with the witnesses here and what they told investigators before. Then it was her dad who squeezed her, of course. Lots to dissect here in this high profile and really a riveting case. Our legal analyst and criminal defense attorney David Mugridge is here once again. How are you, sir?
Good evening. Pleasure to be here.
I'll tell you what, first and foremost, I want to go back to Thursday because the defense attorneys didn't believe that the prosecution stated their case, and they wanted to dismiss it once again, and the judge said, no, we're moving on. As a defense attorney, would you have done that move?
I'm not sure that I would have dismissed it outright. I mean, I would have not thought about it, but I would have made sure that I was on good grounds and that I had a judge who I thought would realistically grant that kind of a motion. Mm-hmm. And I know we had kind of a judge tipping his hand early on when they were talking before the jury selection, kind of about how he felt about the case. So I think I might have questioned whether or not I had a success or a chance of success in front of the public media winning on that kind of a motion, yeah.
And you heard some of the most compelling testimony coming from the two daughters this week.
Right.
Did it help or hurt Dr. Joaquin Arambula?
Well, it depends on which side of the table you're sitting on. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, it certainly showed to the jury the fact that this entire case, if you will, is dependent on the testimony of two little girls, a 6-year-old girl and a 7-year-old girl. And when you're relying on that, you'd better have some other evidence to really be able to convince the jury that you've got a solid case.
You're seeing some video there that was actually admitted into court in as exhibit for the prosecution where it was Dr. Joaquin Arambula talking with our station, KC24, back in December when this incident happened. And there it was determined that there was some conflicting statements that Dr. Joaquin Arambula. If you're the jury, how important is that where it seems like he's saying one thing and now we're hearing another in court?
Well, of course, I've never had the luxury of being on a jury, but I'm certain as a prosecutor, I'm going to be relying on that. I'm going to be pointing that out to the jury. The problem is again, Alexander, we got to remember we're dealing with a misdemeanor case and we're dealing with a law where there's no clear-cut line of where abuse starts and where proper parental control or discipline ends.
You know, something that happened in court that nobody's reporting on. Right after the two girls got off the stand, they went straight to their dad and gave them a hug. That's kind of courtroom theatrics there. How, when you're a jury and you're looking at that, how important is that, at least for the defense?
Well, if you're the defense, certainly something like that happened, I think is going to be helpful to you. And it did not look like, to me, it didn't, and I was sitting right there, it did not look to me like it was orchestrated or planned out in any way. On the contrary, it looked very much like both of his daughters went over to him, sincerely gave him a hug. One of the daughters actually skipped out of the courtroom afterwards. It was a very emotional type of a scene.
And it's an emotional case, and I want to bring in some more compelling testimony here from a CPS worker who took the stand. Here is her account of the day in question.
He grabbed her and held her, put her on the bed, held her down on the bed. It was difficult for her to breathe and she was crying. She was trying to explain to him. He was squeezing her cheeks so that she couldn't explain to him. Then slapped her on the sides of her face, then fell on the toy as he was trying to get up from the bed.
And again, that's from the CPS worker testifying, where the prosecution called that CPS worker as a witness. When you hear something like that, that's the CPS worker. Sounds very damaging.
Well, it can sound damaging, but on the other hand, it can also be helpful to the defense because remember, CPS were the people that originally decided that nothing was wrong. There was no risk of harm to these children, so they allowed them to go back home to mom and dad.
And another conflicting story here, the CPS worker testified about the daughter being coached. This was a very important point in the case earlier this week. Here's what the CPS worker had to say.
She said, yes, that her grandmother told her that it was like a job interview and helped her pick out her outfit and suggested that she should only talk about the good things with her family, and that if she thought about the bad things or wanted to express the bad things, that she should think about all of the good things that her father does for her.
And when you hear that, the CPS worker is saying, yeah, it seems that there was some coaching involved here. Once again, the prosecution trying to prove that this happened. Did they get that across, you think, to the jury?
Well, I certainly, if I was a defense attorney, I would certainly wish that that kind of a statement never came out. That's certainly not helpful. But on the other hand, again, we're still talking about a 7-year-old girl, you know, who's involved in, for the first time in her life, in a courtroom setting with a lot of people that are asking her questions. And it's hard to understand what a 7-year-old might be thinking about when they're in that kind of a situation.
Last question, and I got 5 seconds here. Did the prosecution do enough to get a guilty verdict on this jury?
I don't believe so. I said last week, I think this is going to be a hung jury, and I still feel that way.
All right. David Mugridge, hey, we appreciate your analysis.
My pleasure.
Okay.